Hello everyone. If you've either had a biblical education or watched Seven starring Kevin Questionable Spacey, then you'll know that gluttony is a cardinal sin. But what if you didn't care? Meet Edward Dando, jailbird by day, oyster slurper by night. Apprenticing as a hatter, he realised that it wasn't worth it since he was from Britain, where the sun is banished. So he was unemployed, but still refused any form of poor relief, saying that he had a soul above it. But he didn't have a soul above gluttony and took up his other passion, casual theft and being a bit of a nuisance. His genius tactic was to eat at a restaurant or a stall and then just tell the proprietor that he had no money. Of course, they couldn't do anything because Dando had just destroyed all of the evidence. Or at least, that was what I believed until I tried it myself. Anyway, don't worry about my health as I rot in prison. Back to a funny man from history. He'd regularly show up and eat hundreds of oysters and wash it all down with beer, gaining some notoriety. Or at least that's what people say. Dando claimed that this is all exaggerated and that the most he ever ate in one sitting was 300 oysters and 1.5 loaves of bread and butter. He says that like that's normal enough though. So let me repeat. That's 300 oysters. Let's say that the average length of a European oyster is 7.5 centimetres long. So that's Dando eating 22.5 metres of oysters. That's nearly a third of the length of Air Force One, or nearly 3 Cessnas long, or nearly 2 times the length of Amelia Earhart's plane in Night at the Museum, Battle of the Smithsonian. One day, his eating habits were taken too far when he decided to eat nearly 2 pounds of ham and beef, a half-quartern loaf of bread, 7 pats of butter, and most forgivably 11 cups of tea. So he was sentenced to jail, which on the downside meant, jail, but on the upside meant free clothes. He also got them from workhouses, but something tells me that these weren't luxury either. Another thing that I've heard about prisons is their quality of food. Dando certainly had too. He stole bread and beef from his fellow prisoners and was told that if he did it again, say it with me now, transportation to Australia. Soon enough though, he was let out. It's time for him to turn his life around. Maybe he'll write the great American novel. Maybe he'll discover penicillin a century early. Maybe he'll... Edward? The very day he left prison for stealing, this man waltzed into a shop and stole. He ate 154 oysters, some bread and some ale. And his reasoning? Why, he was very peckish. So he was taken to court again and was arrested for a little more time. Jump ahead to 1830 and Dando was arrested for leaving inns without paying. When the magistrate saw who he was, they just let him go. They said that this one was on the inns, or something. Partially this is because the whole situation is funny enough to go on You've Been Framed, and partially because of other more normal reasons. See, Edward had built up a bit of a reputation, but he had also built up quite a crowd of followers. His trials had huge crowds, including some of the very people he stole from. However, Edward Dando was not your run-of-the-mill oyster thief. No. He was a social campaigning oyster thief. He said that he was being punished for debt whilst the rich ran on credit, which isn't too wrong. Well, repeat the process of arrest, jail, release and stealing on the day of release for a couple of years. Well, anyway, all good things must come to an end, as must all mediocre things. Dando died in 1832 from cholera, and there was an outpouring of poetry and obituaries. My favourite one said that even as a young lad he always wanted to be an oyster-eater. What's more, Thackeray, as in Mr. Vanity Fair, wrote a novella inspired by him called The Professor. Funny, this is the second time a Victorian writer has published a book based on the stories from these videos. Maybe I have a talent. Right, well I think we can all agree that it's now going to be really difficult to walk past an oyster stall and not be half tempted to swipe them, Dando style. Well then.